I would like your support in reminding me to end the recording.
Sure.
Because in my office sessions, we always have some operations person who would start and end it. So it doesn't stay in my head that it needs to be ended.
Now, one good thing is when you click on leave, it records and saves.
Yes, is what I thought. But Timsy said that there was an instance where a lot of time there was a blank recording. Right?
We'll remind you. If
Thank
not me, definitely Neha.
Yes, one of you, yes.
So we can begin if you're
Shall
ready.
we start? Yes, I was about to ask that. Shall we start? Kamal, Renu, would you be comfortable?
Yeah,
sure. Neha, always. I spent yesterday saying Neha a lot of times. After a very long time, my daughter was with me. So after a very long time, I was saying Neha the whole day. So welcome everybody to a conversation of about 45 minutes to 1 hour, where, like I mentioned in my introduction, I'm so happy that all of you have joined me in my exploration and understanding of ICF's core competency number 1, demonstrates ethical practice. As always, and I think my wonderful partners from the MCC cohort will agree with me, every time we prepare for a session like this, I think that is genuinely when we pause and ponder. And I hope that today for all of you, I can create similarly some pause and ponder moments. When we talk about ethics, recently in one of the sessions I was taking, we were talking about words like honesty, trust, and transparency. And I realize, as I often do, that these words are very fluidly and interchangeably used. And often everybody around would have a very different interpretation of these words. So it's like very important that we understand and make sure that all of us are on the same page with it. So for example, if I ask you, how many of us are fundamentally, basically, usually honest? Isn't it so? So while we're very honest, I would also like to take a situation which I'm going to put Suresh as the hero in that situation. There would have been a time for all of us, including Suresh, when we learned how to ride a bicycle or a bike or a car, and we still didn't have license. And, we would go out with the keys. And it is very uncanny how when we go towards the key, from somewhere deep inside, our mother would ask, "Kahan ja rahe ho?" And we would very honestly respond, "Bahar." And before our mother asked the dangerous second question, "Kahan bahar?"
Kahan bahar?
we would run away. So a lot of us, we have grown up with this concept of honesty without realizing that our honesty does not have openness and therefore transparency. So it's a very strange situation where we very confidently say that we are honest. At the same time, most often than not, we are not open and therefore we are not transparent. And as we all go through our ACC, PCC, MCC, I realize these 3 words play a very important role in our presence in a coaching conversation. In the coaching conversation, if I ask, "Are you honest?" I'm sure all of us will say yes. And then we'll add the caveat, depends on the situation and the people.
Or most of the time.
Most of the time, yes. And I think that is where the whole word ethics takes on a very important role. And by the way, for the first time, let me acknowledge, I renewed my PCC last December, and even then I hadn't realized. It's only yesterday that I realized that we have a code of ethics, and we have a core competency on ethics. And I was like, really? Thoda overdose nahi ho gaya? I was like, why do we have so much of ethics everywhere? And yesterday, actually, I had done this PPT a little time ago, but I was binging on ethics last 2 days. And as usual, I'd like to start with some questions that came to my mind. What words come to your mind when you hear ethics?
I would say respect and responsibility.
Wow. Thank you, Renu.
Doing the right thing.
Doing the right thing.
Being an example or sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just saying, being an example or a role model.
Interesting.
Saying what you do and doing what you say.
I remember one of our customers saying, say what you mean what you say. True.
And there are other connotations of ethics, like you say, work ethic. I'm not sure if you have the word ethics used anywhere else, but work ethic and probably other genres of ethics, maybe. So, and everybody knows what it might look like or feel like, but I'm not sure everybody knows the definition of it, particularly. He's got good or she's got good work ethic. And then you expect the person to be on time, say the right thing, maintain commitments. Probably it's all of that.
Perfect. So yes, and ironically, similar to the oxymoronic work-life balance, even in ethics, we have something called work ethics, as if it's a separate entity from our personal ethics. And definitely, like you mentioned, being punctual, being on time, being punctual, being ourselves, being present, and on time being with whatever work we are doing. Even flagging issues on time becomes part of work ethic. Supporting and taking support within the frame of our work also becomes work ethic. So that's a truly thought-provoking space, Suresh. When I look at, as you mentioned, people say work ethic. If you ask them to define it, they wouldn't, but they know whether the person has it or not. It's a very ambiguous situation for us to be in, as in our space. Yes, Neha.
Well, just what Suresh and you just said prompted a thought. I don't know whether we use the term ethic and ethics in the same way. I have not seen another, like work ethic is so often used. It's never work ethics. It's, you know, it is work ethic. And as you rightly said, we seldom use ethic with something beyond work, right? We don't use the term personal ethic, right? We say ethics, ethical, unethical is used even more. Work ethic seems to be in its own trip. There's something else happening on work ethic. And somewhere I'm also, with so much of this saga going on around Twitter and Musk and what he's up to. And I was just thinking, as you're talking about this work ethic and ethics, you know, we are dissing him, and probably rightly so. The world is dissing him for poor leadership ethic or so and whatever. But he's doing whatever he's doing as per his own work ethic and personal ethic. And he's staying true to it, whatever that may be. So we talk of ethic and ethics so very universally, as if, you know, if I say ethic, you definitely should mean the same thing, right? It is such a lovely given in our heads. just because you don't agree with me, you're not ethical according to me, because my ethic is the only ethic that exists for me. And I think they're a part of ethics in coaching, and especially so in coaching, maybe in other areas as well, is to have that space for, multiple ethics probably to coexist.
In fact, I think, Neha, when you asked that question, or rather your sentence had a question mark in it, it reminds me of something I read where it says that one of the code of ethics requires us to be collaborative and create collaborative spaces. And beautifully so, it is about collaborating our world with our coachee's world. And I think that is one of my pause and ponder moments. Like, how do we really collaborate our sense of ethic, our values, our beliefs with the person sitting in front of us? And there again, I was wondering how much of honesty and transparency do we allow ourselves to bring into that space? A lot, I think, depends on what do we experience when we are in a space or a frame where ethic is strong. What does it make us think, feel, and do?
Depending on whether it is aligned to our own ethic or not, it can be
Yes.
liberating or it can be restricting.
Very true. Very true.
And I talk a lot about it to some of my clients who I work with in the interview space and in my erstwhile role with HR. When we're talking about cultures, when you're talking about whether it aligns with yours or not, core values. And this is a very, very genuine ask that I request them to consider whether it is aligned with their sense of ethic or not.
It also, I think, in me at least, and since you said HR, in the space that I work with, that is the L&D, I strongly believe even if our ethic concepts are not being mapped completely, the fact that everyone is functioning on an ethic kind of creates a very strong base for collaboration and creates a very strong base for giving. If I know, like suppose if I am working with Renu and I know that she has a strong work ethic or she has a strong ethic and I know that I have a strong ethic, if we can bring in that sense of mutual respect, then a lot of giving happens. And so even if our various levels of ethics don't match, if we can sense the ethic in someone, like Renu mentioned, that respect comes in, and with respect, the readiness to give comes in, is a thought I have. Does it resonate?
I think you need to repeat.
So like I took the example of Renu. So suppose Renu and I need to work together and I can sense that she has a very strong sense of ethic. May or may not know the details, may or may not know if it maps with mine. But immediately the fact that she has a strong sense of ethic makes me want to respect her. And therefore, brings in a readiness in my mind to give in my interaction with her.
Yeah, definitely resonates. If that's your question, Maya. I think you instinctively know in some situations that your values are in alignment. Individual values, personal values are in alignment. Sometimes you have to wait for situations or experiences to even know whether the values are really in alignment. We could get led away sometimes into thinking that it is, and later on realize with the shock that it isn't.
Wasn't there.
That's also possible. But yes, I guess when, and if I'm remembering ethics at work or connotations that form in my mind about work ethic also, it would definitely resonate and it would align in your mind. This person is pretty similar to what I do, very subconsciously. And then you have a better relationship, or you can have a better discussion, maybe work together to resolve issues, things like that. So ethics, and if you're specifically referring to ethics within a workspace, I guess in a matter of time, it's easy to understand with whom can you align and with whom can't you align, sort of a thing. Have I answered your question?
In fact, not only you have answered, you've triggered another question. You use the phrase matter of time. I was wondering, how does that work in our coaching space? Because it is not really a luxury that we possess. So we kind of start a coaching session. We have 1 hour max. And in that space of time, do we really have the luxury of sensing alignment of ethics for us to be in a space of respect and giving?
To me, the coaching space, ethics in the coaching space is more obvious.
Nice.
And usually when you have what we call contra evidence is when it hits you that, wow, there's a problem. Otherwise, it usually goes, it's there, but it's not specifically called out. If you think whether it was there, yes, it was there. That's the answer that you get. But when something contravenes, conflicts, is when you might be thinking, this is not going okay.
In line with what you said, I think when we practice coaching, and especially when we practice with our peer coaches, this aspect is a given. We don't think twice about it. We don't even think about it. It's a given. And that is, I think, when we are thrust into the real world and we are like, okay, it's not really a given, and we don't realize that it is not ethic, that it is ethic that's an issue. We think that either we are not good coaches or we think the other person is not coachable.
Yeah.
And, and there's a definite contradiction in the vibe between us and the other person.
Kamal says in the chat box, a competency that is assessed by its absence. That very well said.
Yes.
And I would say not just assessed, but you can use the word assessed.
I think this sentence is from Janet Harvey, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. Janet said this. It is a competency that is assessed by its absence. Truly well said, Kamal. Keeping in mind the fact that between coaches it is given, but when it comes to real time and real life, it is not necessarily a given. It brings me to the next question. How do you know that you are ethical in a situation?
Okay, may I?
Yes, please.
Okay, so as I've shared earlier with some of the mentors here who are there, that I come from a teaching background. So when it talks about a student and a teacher, I know that space is altogether different for sure. But yeah, when we talk about, we have students from of different types that we have, or they are coming from different spaces. But we as teachers, we cannot just go by, is it aligning or is it not aligning with their ethics or something like that. So I don't know whether I should take that here or not, because this is altogether a different space.
Renu, while you do say, I get where you're coming from when you say it could be a different space, because it's not a Guru Shishya kind of space. Nevertheless, since I have been a teacher for 20 years and then continued in the space of training, I get what you say. When we enter the classroom or we enter the training room, the way we stand in front of them has to instinctively trigger trust.
Yeah.
So at the end of it, irrespective of everybody's planet of ethic, if we as coaches, the moment we smile and say hello, if we can trigger instinctively a sense of trust that leads to transparency, then I think we've set the base for a good coaching session.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah.
And to me, if I can, Maya,
Yeah, sure.
to me, the only difference between teaching and coaching is teaching is usually telling, educating and telling, and you might use the word prescriptive because it is teaching students who are not yet adults, and coaching is not prescriptive. To me, besides that, pretty much everything else, especially with ethics, they share the same platform, I would think. I don't know, I'm open to thoughts.
May I add, Suresh?
Sure.
Okay, so when you say that it is about students or they are not adults, I think respect, I think they are also in that space that they also feel that they are respected. This is what I feel, right? So if you are giving them that respect, or you are considering them as like, okay, you are in the same space as us. So I think that makes it easy for us to go through that journey, what I feel.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Why I referred to that was they're not people with experience and knowledge yet.
Yeah.
In that sense,
right.
yeah, in that sense is what I meant. They're not yet adults.
Yeah.
So they're children and they therefore need the knowledge, and therefore telling works and prescribing works.
But again, I have always said that they never remember what you taught them. They always remember how you taught them. So that is what I always have felt, that this is what keeps that connection between you and your students always alive. That is what.
How you made them feel.
Yes, how you made them feel. That is, no one remembers what you taught, what chapter or what questions you had asked, but yes, how do you make them feel that is more important. What I as a teacher have always felt. That is right.
And in that case, I see huge similarities between the two. But yeah, Maya, back to ethics.
Yes. Kamal, did you raise your hand? Were you about to say something?
I think I forgot what I had to say, but the fundamental point that came to my mind as this discussion is progressing is, what is the essence of this competency, and what is the intention of this competency? Because I remember earlier we had meeting ethical guidelines and professional standards, which then broke into two, which is demonstrates ethical practice and embodies coaching mindset. So, what's coming to my mind here is, what was the intent of when we already have an ICF code of ethics? What led ICF to think about having demonstrates ethical practice as a separate competency in the first place?
It is something that I have ventured to understand and put together my understanding in the upcoming slides. suffice to say, right now, the double dose of emphasis is not misplaced.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. However, would be curious to sort of think about what was a thought of ICF for creating a separate competency. And one of the things that the competence, the code of ethics talks about is also clarifying the differentiation between different fields of discipline.
Absolutely.
And perhaps this is one area which has always been a lot of people who are not credentialed would put forward coaching as something else, and something else is coaching. And one of the things that I was reading, one of the ICF research papers around how they arrived at the competencies, and although they didn't say it in so many words, but what I picked up from that was that there was a lot of confusion that people had around understanding the space of coaching. And there were a lot of professionals who were sort of using that to their advantage, which is why they felt it's important to have a competency that clearly articulates what we stand for in no uncertain terms.
Very true. In fact, I think as a starting point, ICF Code of Ethics creates a system, a structure, which helps us as ICF coaches to create a brand and a worth and a value in the market that undeniably says we are ethical. And the competency, the core competency of ethics is a deeper dive into us as coaches. And it functions at 3 levels. The competency requires us to first be ethical with ourselves. So are we authentic? Are we sincere? Are we genuine with ourselves? Only then can we demonstrate this authenticity, genuineness, and sincerity in a coaching space. The second is only then comes our relationship with the coachee. And then in this tango between being authentic to self and authentic to coachee, are we fulfilling the do's and don'ts of the code of ethics? So for me, the competency is a deeper dive into how we show up, while the ICF Code of Ethics is more about a structure or a system that when a credentialed person wears the ICF hat, the world knows we are ethical. A challenge still, Kamal, I would say it's still a challenge because we ourselves are still floundering through it, if I may say so. But yes, and like you very rightfully mentioned, demonstrate ethical practice is a first brick. And together with the coaching mindset, if these are not in place, then we haven't even begun our journey.
Absolutely, Maya.
Having said that, I would also like to add that there is no point where we can say, okay, I've laid the first brick and I've laid the second brick. There is no point where we can actually say for sure that we have reached a point where by default in our DNA, we will be demonstrating ethical practice. And by default in our DNA, we would be embodying a coaching mindset. It is continuous, it is ongoing, and it's constantly evolving and being enhanced is how I look at it. So
absolutely.
Thank you. And so now that we understand that it is extremely foundational, and we also have had a glimpse of how interestingly we are on the same page, but still a little varied, let's have a look at how ICF looks at bringing in a greater degree of concreteness. As usual, I forgot to listen to Suresh, and I have half my slide being covered by us. So what we're going to discuss today is a quick look at old versus new, how the vocabulary has been changed, an overview both of ethics as a competency and ethics in the code of ethics. We will also have a look at what does mastery look like. And here I would invite how all of you perceive mastery in the sense of, here I'd like to define mastery. Are we so comfortable with this competency that we do not realize we have to work on it?
Or exactly the opposite?
Fair enough. And then a few thoughts on what not to do. So these are the 4 major chunks that I would be looking at in our discussion today. So if you look at the old and the new competency, very interestingly, the frame was meeting ethical guidelines, whereas today it is demonstrates ethical practice. In the previous old one, it was more like a checklist. And now it is more about proof. In our conversation, both us and our space, are we demonstrating ethical practice? So now we have a question. Okay, what are the aspects that are involved when demonstrating ethical practice? Are there 3-4 parameters there? How does anyone know that, okay, the ethical practice was being demonstrated? Or how does the coachee sense the ethical practice? And that is where the competency comes into play. The competency gives us a hanger with points and says, let's start with these points. And that's the beauty of the competency. So having a look at the definition, understands and consistently applies what? Coaching ethics and standards of coaching. So if you are creating a space that demonstrates ethical practice, we as coaches, we would be not only demonstrating, we would also be showing that we are sensitive. We would be careful in our choice of language. We would ensure that we abide by certain non-negotiables. We would be maintaining a certain essence in our coaching sessions. And we would also be referring to certain aspects which are beyond the ambit of coaching. So here's a multiple choice. If Neha and Suresh remember, last time I had matched the following, which we didn't do. This time I was adamant that we will do it. So I kept it right back in the beginning. So can you choose a word from 1 to 7 as a start for this sentence?
Is sensitive.
So are we sensitive to the client's identity, environment, experiences, values, and beliefs? Interestingly, a lot of times, a lot of videos that I watched and articles that I read, very strangely, all the examples for sensitivity were centered around Muslims. I found that because multiple videos I watched and read a few articles and some blogs, everywhere the common example was related to Muslims. So I guess it's self-explanatory. Nevertheless, here I would like to fall back a little on my experiences. Generationally, there are differences. So if we have a coachee who is perhaps a different generation from a different socioeconomic strata or from a different geography, we often find that the way they look at, say, relationships, sometimes triggers a sense of identity and judgment within us. Sometimes a sense of protest within us. And that is something we need to be aware of. If you're like, even in my space of work, sometimes I find a lot of women employees, they come from a background that says obey men. And when they have a male boss, they are excellent workers, excellent employees. And then when they have a female boss, there's a lot of acrimony and there's a lot of dissent. And all these people are sent for conflict management to Maya. And so I'm like, okay, let's pause, take a step back and have a look at the situation. And many times I have found, like, okay, when he used to say it, it's okay, he's a man, he can say it like this, but she's a woman, she needs to understand me better. There's that expectation that comes in. So how do we as coaches retain sensitivity, yet ensure it doesn't color our next question? Interestingly, the fact is that coaching is not aiming to change the identity of a coachee, but seeks to leverage the identity so that the coachee has a better balance between themselves, their environment, their experiences, their values and beliefs.
Maintains.
Again, the previous one indicated that we should be aware of the distinctions, but the new competency version requires us to clarify and highlight the distinction. So in the older one, it was just that we needed to be aware and maintain it in our heads. But now we actually create a very open space where we say, hey, okay, this particular thing that you want from us is more in terms of consulting. And I think for some of us who've been in the corporate sector, there is no line between coaching and mentoring. And sometimes it's always mentoring. So
yeah,
keeping that challenge in mind, I think the most difficult aspect about this particular space has been to be as convincing as a coach about the validity of coaching as I would of mentoring. Any thoughts on that? Are you thinking or? So, all right.
Can you repeat what you just said, Maya?
I was just waiting for Suresh to say, Maya, repeat the question. So, so I don't need to validate the value of mentoring. Usually people who mentor do so in a dynamic that says, you've been there, done that, you have that experience, you know what works, what doesn't work, and so mentor me.
Yeah.
So the validity of a mentor is often presumed, assumed, and concluded. Whereas when it comes to coaching, the validity of the process of coaching, the validity of us as coaches, and the validity of the benefit of coaching, sometimes I feel a little overwhelmed by this need to validate.
Yeah. Well, that's true, Maya. I think what you're saying, you got to be a soldier for coaching, right? You got to be the cheerleader for coaching, and saying that it has some very visible benefits, which is why the need to corroborate what you're saying with more and more research and more studies. Interestingly, the EMCC competence framework gives equal validity to both coaching and mentoring.
Yes.
So that makes sort of my job easier as a EMCC senior practitioner as well. So I would say that it's very cultural. Specifically in India, I think coaching, we weren't raised the coaching way. We were very much raised being told what was right and what was not right. And then to, as an adult, adopt a way which is very different from what you've been used to all these years. And interestingly, the ecosystem that you deal with are also people who came from similar backgrounds. So therefore, this question about, asking questions, so many questions, one after the other, doesn't lead a person anywhere. I mean, cynics would say that, right? And which is why you're saying that, but there's the left brain and there's the right brain, and there is all of that neuroscience around it and all of that. So I think that's going to continue to happen, which is why I think it's interesting how coaches sometimes, in the spirit of integrity of being a coach, also highlight that, I'm taking off my coaching hat for a bit here and saying, this is something that's worked for me in the past, and you may want to look at it. But I think when you're going out there and selling your services, there is that sort of mantle to say, what we do works. Please try it. There is not an acceptance which is very natural. It's not like fish to water. You have to keep justifying what you do. And that's going to be a couple of decades, I guess, till people, especially in this part of the geography, understand how it works and why it works. So yeah, you're right. I agree.
True that. Thank you for highlighting the possibility of flexibility. When you said like, okay, I can keep my coaching hat aside for a minute, and here's a thought I'd like to share, or here's an example or a similar situation that I'd like to share. And actually, that is one space where I think, how do we uphold the ICF code of ethics and uphold the core values while we coach, without shifting our stance into, say, mentoring or consulting or psychotherapy? I think that is where what I meant when I said that the ICF code of ethics is a structure or a system that helps us to stay within an ambit and still be flexible about what we bring to the table. So this is abides by.
Abides by.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is what I started the whole discussion with: our own personal integrity and honesty
Demonstrates. Refers.
No. Appropriate and respectful.
Maintains. Uses language.
Uses language, yes. Uses language which is appropriate and respectful to client and sponsors and relevant stakeholders. In the language, I think, is extremely crucial because our questions are framed using languages. And I remember with all of us, when we were in Rishikesh, if you remember, all of us expressed a challenge with the question, what comes up for you? And many people don't understand what comes up for you. Nothing comes. So that language aspect of are we using a language that is not just respectful and appropriate, but I feel also comprehensible. Another thing that I would like to share is from my experience. I would say, especially I would say that North Indians tend to be a little more metaphorical than South Indians, since I have both categories here. So, and also,
You
if I
touched
look
a raw nerve there, Maya.
no, I know, because Suresh and I are like South Indian. So having said that, a generation that has grown up on Shakespeare would definitely be more metaphorical than today's students who have grown up on functional English or conversational English.
Yeah.
Right. So definitely when we look at language, the appropriacy and respectfulness apart, I would like to introduce another element, and that is realizing that since coaching is generally being done in English, English is used differently by people, and therefore we need to be aware of that. Maintaining confidentiality. I am actually quite taken aback at the number of examples that I happen to come across in the videos and blogs on violation of confidentiality. I'm genuinely taken aback. How? Why? Was what came into my head. And it does strike me that very often these two things, this personal integrity and confidentiality, are two things that ICF seems to have come across multiple examples of violation, which has caused them to emphasize this in a competency.
Yeah.
It really, really makes me pause and ponder. Okay, it's like, oh my God, am I demonstrating personal integrity?
Mm.
Am I genuinely ensuring confidentiality?
Maya, I have a question.
Sorry?
I have a question. So when you say you saw many examples of how this confidentiality comes up in so many examples, any insights there as to why certain coaches would forego confidentiality or not keep that, not honor confidentiality? Why would that happen?
So there were two areas where this was, multiple examples came up. Some of them came up in the coaching of youth, where the coach felt it necessary to inform the parents.
Okay.
That was one area. Jo phir bhi, like, I think with the Indian context, I think I would understand. Agree and accept is a different thing, but I understand. The other one, again, I understand. Whether I agree and accept is a different thing. So if my client is planning to leave the company, or if my client is planning to talk against the boss,
Okay.
and the boss is a sponsor or the company is a sponsor for me,
okay,
it's almost like which side of the bread is buttered. So that brings in a conflict.
Okay.
And that is where this confidentiality aspect. So these are two major areas of examples, Neha, that I came across.
Okay, thank you.
And then, of course, refer the clients to other support professionals. And I think this is crucial. And if we are in the ICF chapters, or even if we are with that other group, I think some of us are in, called Shri Mantrans, there is an amazing network, and it is good to have a network of people with other support professionals. I mean, people who are other support professionals, so that we can create a sense of, it is easier to tell people we will not do psychotherapy for them if we know that we can refer them to somebody.
So to your point, Maya, of the youth case, I don't know what the context was, but there is clearly a provision within the ICF Code of Ethics that under which conditions will the information not be kept confidential. So
In fact, Kamal, that point that you raised just now brings me to the point that how many of us remember when we did our ACC, PCC, the contracting was dinned into our head. And suddenly contracting makes a hell of a lot of sense. And the freedom to revisit the contracting is something that we as coaches should take into our hands. If ever we need to relook at contracting, reframe the contracting, we should not hesitate as coaches to do so in the interest of ensuring this competency. Right?
yeah, but I think it's also in the interest of not just the competency, but it's also in the best interest of the clients and the sponsors or the interested, stakeholders involved.
Stakeholders.
As to why that information, if kept confidential, could harm the larger interest of the client, or maybe risks of danger to self or others, or maybe a legal issue or whatever. So there may be multiple scenarios under which, and I think you're right, that this needs to be shared very openly with the client at the beginning of the engagement, that this is going to be indeed the case, should the coach feel appropriate in that moment.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to share that along with the, so this is very clearly what the competency says. And I think it's very comprehensive. Like I said, it starts at, it's functioning at 3 levels. One is ourself. Second is the coach and the coachee. And the third is the structure or the system that helps to hold our coaching space together. So you have personal integrity and honesty. Then you have the client, sensitivity to the client, language, and you have the confidentiality aspect. And you have the distinctions aspect. And then, of course, the fact that we are maintaining the code of ethics and upholding the core values. So just to save you the time and the trouble of going around remembering what is code of ethics and the core values, I just put it together here for you in this. And not everything, but just a glimpse. So if you look at the core values and the ethical principles, the new ones, does anyone remember the new ones?
Professionalism, collaboration,
humanity, and
one more.
Equity.
Equity, yeah.
Equity, yes. I think the humanity and equity was perhaps the need of the hour. So if you look at following the core values of professionalism, you will find that our interactions automatically become a space of trust very easily. You remember I said instinctively when we enter a room, we trigger a sense of trust, and this professionalism is what helps to trigger that sense of trust. The openness towards diverse perspectives and bringing in a sense of collaboration without getting judgmental about it is where we look at collaboration. And also all of us might be remembering in coaching multiple times we've heard every person is capable of coming up with their own solutions. So we just need to help them collaborate with their strengths. So it's not just about us collaborating with the coachee. It's also about getting the coachee to collaborate with their own strengths.
Yeah, I think more of that.
Yes, absolutely. And teacher to teacher, I think this is what we do most of the time. So, yes. And the fact that every human being has something good in them is just such a beautiful reiteration of the space that we hold. And everyone deserves a chance to help themselves be a better version of themselves, and that is equity. Something that how many of you realize that sometimes when you go through these things, you realize that you've held it very strongly and like somebody just put it into words for you?
Sometimes Maya, I think that there is a lot of internal negotiation that one may have to constantly do. Simple things. I mean, unless there's a framework of personal integrity that you fundamentally possess, it's very difficult to just learn the ICF code of ethics and start living it because you've got your credential.
Oh, true.
Right.
True.
A simple thing like, over the years, I have collected a lot of articles and reading materials, as a part of one's learning journey, right? And then the question comes, how ethical is it for me to share it with my client? Right? So the fact that it's a question that does occur also shows that there is a personal compass that one is constantly navigating, right? Otherwise, as friends or as a client, I mean, if I see that a client is in a situation where he or she could potentially benefit from reading up one of those articles, it should be okay for me to just forward that article and say, hey, why don't you just go through this? I thought it would benefit.
I think, Kamal, rather than it's okay, what comes to our mind is what's the harm? If I may rephrase it in another way, often our compass functions like that. More on the what's the harm parameter rather than it's okay parameter. But I coincidentally, Kamal, Suresh, you remember recently we had an example in our WhatsApp group where one of us shared chapter 2 with a client and attachment detachment, and that made so much sense to the client and it really benefited the client. It was a happy share on our WhatsApp group, and I agree with you, Kamal. I think very important and pivotal to what we do in coaching is what else, what more, what different can we bring to the table to create a sense of facilitation in our coachee towards a better themselves.
Absolutely.
Can we help the coachee facilitate that for themselves? And whatever tools we have, if we can bring it onto the table.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but it's, I mean, the point I was making here is that sometimes it's that, the question that I posed on the group around ease and easily, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Does it easily come to you, or is there a sense of ease, or sometimes you have to stop and say, well, I wish I could do this, but you know what, I can't. And so those are those little negotiations that we continue to do always.
Yeah, very true. And so these are the core values, which I felt was like somebody had just taken the words out of my head and put it in front of me. And truly, truly appreciate the way the whole thing has been put together. As a licensee of this, I felt really privileged that this is how the present set of core values have been framed. And one thing that I'd like to highlight is that in the previous one, we talk about ethical standards. And these ethical standards are something that helps us constantly renew, reiterate, and re-emphasize the strengths in the coaching process. I repeat, the ethical standards are something that I felt personally. They help to reiterate, re-emphasize the strengths of the coaching structure or strategy. And that is very important because, as I mentioned a little before, it's so easy for me to vouch for mentoring. Am I able to do it with the same elan for coaching? And that is where these ethical standards I felt are quite useful when it helps me to frame that validity for coaching. Having said that, I'm going to put 3 questions here, not necessary for immediate discussion because we had a similar discussion in the beginning. Whose ethics are we following?
Yeah.
Why do we need to follow ethics? And do we ever feel that our ethics are getting violated?
Or is it a verb or a noun?
Good question.
Or an adjective?
Well said. I think the core competency aspect has come in to help all the coaches steady themselves and say कि देखो भैया, this is the core competency. पहले तुम इसको follow करो, फिर बाकी दिखेंगे. So, because the code of ethics is a structure.
Yeah.
It is, you know, like one of those code of conduct documents that we all sign when we become an employee and we forget about it. So to bring it more into our everyday spaces, the core competency is extremely useful. And it's our, I would say it is our yardstick, which tells us, hey, are we on track or not? Whose ethics? Why ethics? At the end, the true north is client centricity, as you mentioned, Kamal.
Yeah.
Right. So it is client centricity. So what are the aspects of ethical standards, which I said I feel really, really helps us? Unambiguous outcome agreements, the contracting part. And one thing I realized, especially the kind of workspaces some of us occupy, it is not enough to talk about confidentiality at the beginning. It is important to reiterate it more often than not, especially when the coachee is not the payee, but the sponsor is. At that time, to reiterate and to be sensitive to, are we communicating effectively enough? The confidentiality aspect is very, very crucial. And that is where I said, if we feel that this confidentiality aspect is, in doldrums, then let's relook at the contract without hesitation. The other aspect is responsibility to the practice and performance. This is, I think, very useful for us because it helps us to define boundaries. What will we and what will we not? And one of the things, like I have often found, many people come and tell me, can you talk to the manager? No, I can't. So, but they take it as, no, I won't. So sometimes when managers send some team member for coaching and then the team member is like, see, you understand me. So why can't you go and explain it to the manager? No, that's not going to happen. And funnily, the I can't is heard as I won't. And that puts my status as a coach even more in doldrums than before. So at the end of it, defining boundaries is a fun dance. But it is important to define boundaries and, like the contract, revisiting. This personal integrity is crucial. There are times when I felt very low. I felt very out of sorts. And we are all fed this line, show up.
Yeah.
And I'm not so sure how authentic we are when we show up no matter what.
A good question to ask is, how many times did I use the word show up before I became a coach? Did I even know the meaning of the phrase show up as opposed to turn up?
Nice.
And what I have arrived at for myself here is, it's a sensibility. Showing up is a sensibility. It's not just a phrase. And for a non-English speaker, if you say, how do you want to show up for this conversation? He'd be like, what the hell does it mean, show up? I'll just log in and I get onto the call. Right? So it's that question about what's coming up for you.
Yeah.
Right? It's similar. What's coming up for you and how do you want to show up are two such coach-loaded words, coaching sort of lexicon. It's very difficult for normal, organizational clients to even decode that.
Very true. And I have constantly been working on coming up with questions that are more in line with vernacular English.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Very important. Yes, I agree with you. And by the way, I am one of those people who don't have, if I know the mother tongue of the coachee, I do not hesitate to translate the question into the mother tongue. The fundamental
Absolutely.
question would remain in, fundamental conversation might remain in English, but again, this sensitivity and trust is something, that comes out more easily and simply if we just switch to one or two words of vernacular in the middle. And it is amazing how confidentiality gets reiterated.
Absolutely.
You say a word, even a word, you don't have to have the whole conversation, but if you say a few words in whatever language the coachee is comfortable with or is thinking in, definitely that sense of confidentiality doesn't even have to be reiterated. It somehow very magically just gets established.
Yeah.
That is where I feel that practice and performance, anything that guides us and simplifies our function is an ethical standard. I'll be honest, I've been doing this continuous professional development. I haven't reached supervision actually. But self-audit is something that doesn't come easy to me. Anybody?
So I think it's a very critical EMCC competency, which is commitment to self-development, although we have something similar, which is embodies a coaching mindset, which is also commitment to self-learning, but they have understanding self and commitment to self-development as a competency, as opposed to ethics or anything like that, as opposed to mindset. So for them, I think, continuously ensuring and assessing yourself on those parameters. In fact, they have a questionnaire as well where you assess yourself on a rating scale and say, where am I as a coach on these competencies, right? So self-audit and supervision, of course, are very, very deeply embedded in that framework. And one factor which differentiates the two, as I think about it now, is that the time that we've spent on discussing the ethics around coaching. There is nothing in the EMCC competency framework that talks anything about ethics. They just have one code of ethics that you don't have to necessarily read, but it's nice to read. But the focus is more on supervision and continuing to sharpen your saw as a coach or mentor.
I think totally second what you said, Kamal. And here for Suresh and Neha, I don't know if she's still around, but
she's left.
Yeah, for me and Suresh, like when we're looking at the MCC part of it, I think our self-audit has gone a little beyond, did we follow the process? Did we follow the parameters? Did we do this? Did we do that? I think the self-audit has moved into a plane where it's more about what was our presence? And how can we make our presence more powerful by being unobtrusive? And I think a lot of our conversations and our feedback have been on that plane. So I'm sure both Kamal and Renu have also experienced it in your own cohorts. It's not just about the self-audit, I feel is not just about what have we done right, what could we do better. It's more about how, as a coach, our presence could be powerful in a very
Deepened.
unobtrusive way.
Yeah.
That is truly challenging, because for us, power is demonstrate your power. Whereas in coaching, power is don't exist, be unobtrusive. Just, hold the space. So for me, a self-audit is something that is a very delicious challenge.
Yeah,
That it needs to be.
absolutely.
And
Yeah.
the last ethical standard here is responsibility to the society. Conformance to the local laws, yes, but bringing in the sense of equality and diversity, a respect and understanding of it, and feeling free to acknowledge that one doesn't really get it also, I think is very important. There are a lot of us who are still not very clear and are grappling with the concept of equality and diversity. And I think it's okay to grapple with it as long as we are grappling with it, crucially. So if you look at the values, that is the professionalism, collaboration, humanity, and equity. And if you look at the ethical standards, where we talk about being responsible to the client, practice, performance, professionalism, and society, these are the things that hold our coaching space together. But the competency is about our language, our behavior, our character, our honesty, our authenticity. And that is what comes up. I put it together in this one slide. So the 3 levels at which demonstrates ethical practice functions is at self, the coach and coachee, and the system. Oh, this is the last slide. Okay. Your man, reach the end. I would be uploading this PowerPoint along with the recording. I have left a YouTube video link there. I am a great, I find extreme value in the videos by the founder of Ericsson. Her coaching sessions, and those are coaching teaching sessions, extremely useful.
Marilyn?
Yeah, Marilyn. And her use of words and her emphasis on language is amazing. It really, really helps me to explore how to frame questions better. So I just put in one link so you can then from there go on and explore more. Another link that I have put somewhere, here. In case you want a quick reference, so I put this also here.
There's also ethics quiz, which is 3 CCEs on the website.
Yes, I've seen that. So yeah. Renu, any thoughts? No,
I think resonating a lot now, as I come from the space which is having some intersection here also. So definitely learning more about it. Yeah.
Was I able to give you a quick image in your head for values, for ethical standards, and for the competency? So that is the most important thing. When you think of the competency, can you remember those 7 points? Personal integrity, sensitivity to language, that part.
Yeah.
And if you can remember the values, and then the ethical standards, that is the responsibility to client, that aspect. So if we keep these 3 segments in our mind, and we explore that, I think it like I said in the beginning, are we comfortable?
Yeah, they all seem to be
You know?
interwoven in a way.
Very true. Very true.
And I think for me, am I more uncomfortable is what I
Yes,
want to
as
go
you
with.
mentioned, yes.
That's a good way to put it. And I guess for me, it was about the code of ethics being that superstructure
Hmm.
for the entire organization, like how you mentioned, Maya, and the competency being the way you practice it, and the behaviors that follow. But the one thing ever since corporate, we have always been talking about is you can either be ethical or not. If you say ethical, so it's either there or it's not there. And this is one competency which probably is a more of a black and white compared to the other competencies. In the other competencies, nuances might work, but this one is more, is it there or not?
Very true. Very true.
So these are my takeaways, but very reflective, very thank you for bringing together values also into the picture. Very nice session, Maya, as always.
Thank you, Suresh. Mutual. And Kamal, just wanted you to know that while we do drown in a lot of messages in the ICF Bangalore WhatsApp, I do always pick up on yours.
Thanks, Maya.
I do always pick up on
I
yours.
always cherish our conversation that we had a few months back. So,
Yes.
but you look very different from your WhatsApp image.
Oh, my WhatsApp image is quite a long time back, and it's the one with my father, right?
I think you've cropped your father out.
No, my WhatsApp image is with my dad.
No, how come I missed that one? Maybe I just focused on you.
My WhatsApp image is with my dad.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, he's been around.
Oh,
for-
yes. Sorry, my bad.
That's
Yeah.
okay.
Yes, it's your father. Very
Renu,
fudgy.
he is definitely. Renu, it was a delight to meet you. I have had the privilege of seeing you in a recording, I think, and now I'm violating ethics here. But yes, but it's such an amazing delight to actually see you in person and listen to you and connect with you on some of our similar backgrounds. Thank you so much for your time and space.
Thank you so much. It's a privilege for me to be in a space with you all there, and I'm learning a lot. Frankly speaking, I'm learning a lot. Thank you so much, all of you.
Wonderful. And Maya, just to remind you to end the recording.
Yes.
Yes.
If you notice, I had already put my hand on it. So yes, I shall stop the recording formally